Eric, it's good to see you again after all those years. To begin with, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? You are now retired, but what did you do during your working life?
Yes, I am a pensioner now for the last 15 years. When I worked in a College of Technology in Worcester as a lecturer in biology and microbiology. It was there I met a colleague, Arthur Fear, who had 2 degrees, one in zoology, one in archaeology. When he knew that I was going to go to Rome for a summer holiday, he said, "You must go to Ostia." And that was my first trip there.
A colleague gave you the advice to go to Ostia. You went there. What was your first impression of the city?
My first impression was it wasn't anything like I expected it to be. I thought I might see a few low walls, possibly bits of mosaic in between, but nothing like it actually turned out to be. The buildings more or less as they were in Ostian times. Took loads and loads of photographs. This was in the early days before I had a digital camera, and I thought when I got home I'll have a look on the internet, see what it says about Ostia. Saw your name, texted you, were you interested in any of my photographs? You said yes. So that was our first coming together, as you might say.
So your passion was almost immediate then?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah.
And after making a lot of photographs, the word graffiti appeared on the scene.
As I remember, you and I and another couple had a meal in the town of Ostia, and it came up then, and as I remember it, you said, would I be interested in taking more and more photographs of graffiti for the website, and to have a purpose to go there was far better than just going to a site and wandering around, not really seeing anything at all. It was the purpose that was the important thing.
So now you had a specific purpose, something to work on in Ostia. It was the graffiti. Why did they excite you?
Well, the fact that they're 2,000 years old and they've been produced by people, proper people, living people at the time, and in many cases it's not recorded anywhere. It's the excitement of finding something that it hasn't been recorded.
You must have visited Ostia countless times. Can you remember how often?
How often? In the first years that we went there would be 3 times a year probably, and each visit would be 3 or 4 days out there. So the total number of days I've spent at Ostia, I could only hazard a guess.
All that travelling must have been quite expensive. Who paid for it?
I paid for it. The job I had in the college at Worcester, the pay was standard for a lecturer, but for me it allowed me to do what I wanted to do, which was to go to Italy, to Ostia and other places as well.
When you came to Ostia to work further on the graffiti, what was your work plan? How did you proceed? How did you begin?
Originally, there was no real work plan, but one evening I was going to the Pantheon to eat, came across a bookshop that was just putting down the shutters about to close, managed to get in, bought a copy of Pavolini's Guide to Ostia, and reading through that was the starting point where graffiti were mentioned. From there it grew to wider things. You find one graffito and then another graffito, and gradually you begin to realise where to look for them. For example, on the walls, where you've got the high quality bricks with the smooth surfaces, that's an obvious place to me to go and look for another graffito. So it's gaining a bit of experience and learning where to look for these graffiti that you very soon, I think, gain going around Ostia.
In order to find graffiti in Ostia, You had to study every inch of plaster. What an undertaking.
Well, when I walk down a wall, I walk sideways. I walk very slowly and can see the whole of the wall that I'm interested in front of me, and I move gradually down. The field of view changes, but I try not to get distracted and thinking something's coming up that could be interesting. Just move slowly down the wall, looking up to about head height. Then at the bottom of the street, turn around, come up the other side, and if there are any entrances, go in there the same way, sideways, very slowly.
That must have been funny to see you standing immobile in front of a wall for a very long time. How did the tourists react to that?
In a word, quizzically, they obviously didn't know what I was doing, and fairly often a group of people would be stood talking, not looking at anything to do with the remains, and I would have to wait till they moved along before I could look at the piece of wall that I wanted. And as they turned around, I got some very odd looks as to what I was doing.
Can you give us some examples of notable graffiti that you found?
Notable graffiti, I would mention the one of the wrestler's head near the garden houses. I would mention the one in the Forum Baths, which certain people don't think is a ancient graffito. The boat with a head on either the prow or the stern. One day I found something which surprised me very greatly on the wall in Ostia, a drawing of two spirals next to each other. Now, how they were drawn, I have no idea. A compass has been mentioned as a possibility, but with a compass I couldn't produce anything as accurately as that. On a recent visit to Ostia, I think I found a third spiral on that same wall, much fainter than the original two, but I'm sure there's a third one on there as well. They look as though they've been drawn in 3D. How they've done it, I have no idea at all. And what they represent, similarly, no idea. One graffito that I always like to go and visit when I'm in Ostia, it's not a spectacular one like some of the ones you find there, but it's a perfect drawing of an amphora. Strangely, it's at ground level, so the person who drew it must have been crouched down, kneeling down or sat down. And surprisingly, it's one that you can only see at certain times during the day. In the morning, it's very difficult to find, but in the afternoon when the sun moved around, there it is. And I always go and check on that to see that it's there. I think that's my graffito.
Did you receive a lot of support from the direction of the excavations?
When I first went to the offices to ask for help, they were very forthcoming, and from that point on, all the people that I did meet, Elizabeth Shepherd, Franco Fabelli and Alfredo, were only too willing to help. They would send somebody down with me to unlock the doors. They would lock me in and go for lunch or whatever, and then come back and let me out. There were no problems as far as I was concerned, and I was more than happy with the help that they gave me.
So you were alone in the buildings for several hours?
Sometimes, yes. I was locked in, the people would go away and possibly have their lunch.
Then one day you stopped. Why was that?
Partly old age, and partly thinking about some of the graffiti that I had found, trying to work out what they were and why they were where they were found. For example, some rooms you go into, there are lots and lots of tally marks, but in another room there's just one set of tally marks. Now, why would there be one set of tally marks in a room? Trying to think, in room 17, who was it who wrote all those graffiti in there? What was room 17? There's a little room at the other side of room 17, exactly the same size as room 17, not a single graffiti in it.
Today, new volunteers are continuing your work using modern technology. How do you feel about that?
I'm delighted that people are carrying on where, in a modest way, I started off. No problems with that at all.
With all your experience, what advice would you give them?
Well, I couldn't really give them any advice in the technical methods that they are using, but just to keep your eyes open really, and you will learn where to look to find graffiti. Sometimes in the old texts they say they're on the third row of bricks underneath the stairs. Things like that very often don't occur, but if you keep your eyes open you'll begin to learn where to find graffiti.
Can you explain to the audience why the work of volunteers in Ostia is so important?
I'm well aware that finances for archaeology in Italy and elsewhere in the world are severely limited these days. So the work of volunteers has become much more important. The more volunteers there are, the more graffiti will be found and recorded for the future.